So now we are leaving, and a little bit about this 3.5, 4 hours what we spent together. Altogether we'll have 3 stops. Now we're on the Buda side. This is Buda side, the other side is Pest. By the way, now we'll say goodbye to that wonderful building. That's our Parliament House on the other side. According to my opinion, that's the most beautiful building in the city. For sure, it's a huge building. It has 700 rooms inside. The total length of the stairs is 20 kilometers long. Poor politicians, they have to walk a lot.
Sad.
And it's 18,000 square meters. That means it's exactly the same size as the Sydney Opera House, just different shape. So I was talking about the city tour. First we're going to that side, the other side, the Pest side, and there is the so-called Hero Square, the biggest square of Budapest, and there we'll get off and we'll spend a little bit short photo stop for approximately 15-20 minutes, and then we'll get back on board and we'll be driving to the Galilean Hill. The Galilean Hill is on this side, Buda side, at the bank of the river. So if the hill is at the bank of the river, from the top of it the view is breathtaking. Believe me, you will love it. And then the third stop will be the so-called Castle District. The Castle District will spend a little bit longer time, like an hour. We will also have some free time too. And after the Castle District, we'll go back to the pier. So that's the program with 3 stops. And visiting actually all parts of the city. Here, if you take a look to the right-hand side, on the other side of the river, at the bank of the river, the big white building is what we call here the Hungarian White House. Of course, it has nothing to do with the White House in the United States. We just call that building because of the color of it, because it's white. It's because the explanation for that, because this was the place where she lived and where she died. Her father, she lived in the 13th century. Her father was a king, King Bela IV, and during his reign, that was the Mongol invasion. And unfortunately, the Mongols killed one of his 8 daughters. And then the king took an oath, and he said if he had ever had a daughter again, he would offer to serve God. And then 1 year later, Princess Margaret was born, and she was sent here to the island to serve God when she was only 9 years old. And kings, and there was also one period in the Hungarian history where it was a very, very popular place. Hungary was under Turkish occupation, Turkish rule in the 16th and the 17th century. And at that time, the head of the Turks, the Sultan, he kept his harem here on the island for more than 100 years. So you can imagine that for that century. The main difference is that here on the Buda side, we have hills. Pest is completely flat. And here the Buda side is older than the other side. The center of this side is from the 13th century. The center of the other side is from the 19th century. So here it is, this lovely bridge, the Margaret Bridge. We're especially proud of this bridge because it was designed by the famous Eiffel company, who designed the Eiffel Tower in Paris, and they designed this bridge too. And we have a lovely view of the city here driving on the bridge. If you take a look to the right, you can see the Parliament House at the bank of the river. The next bridge from here on the right is the Chain Bridge. That is the oldest bridge of Budapest. Being the first permanent bridge crossing the river, local people loved it when it was finished in 1849. And behind of the bridge in the distance you can see a green hill with a statue on the top of it. That's our Liberation Monument, and that will be our second stop. And also you can see on the Buda side, at the Buda end of the chain bridge, there's a big brown building with the green dome. That is the Hungarian royal castle. There are lots of Hungarian kings lived between the 13th and the beginning of the 20th century. And also you can see on the Buda side, there is a white tower on the top of the hill. That's the tower of the Matthias Church. That's the area what we'll be visiting. That will be our third stop. And here we arrive to the Pest side. Actually, the right pronunciation of this side, we pronounce it with an S, Pest. As far as I know, you have a word what you pronounce, you say pest. That's something different. You know, the Pest side, if you take a look around here, you can see these buildings. Here in the center, all of them were built at the end of the 19th century. After 1867, and that was the compromise with the Austrians, and according to it, we became free and independent, but we still had their money. That was the blooming, the flourishing period of the Hungarian history, up to the First World War. So that few decades, during that those years, all of these buildings here on the Pest side they built at that time, including a building what you will see at the next traffic light on the left, which is our comedy theater. The comedy theater, the architect of this building was an Austrian gentleman, and also the people who built it and were working on it, they were also from Austria. So it's a pure Austrian building. And this little boulevard where we're driving down is actually, if you try to imagine this on a map, it's like a semicircle. It starts from the river, and 4 kilometers later it goes back to the river. And along this boulevard we have what the local people especially like, a lot of shops and also a lot of important buildings for the everyday life here for the local people. For example, as we'll turn here to the left, on the right you will see a big brick, yellow and red brick building here on the right. This is the Western Railway Station. In the city we have 3 railway stations, and I think this one is the most beautiful one, because this building was also designed by the Eiffel company, the French company. And still on the right you can see that here we have a big department store, shopping mall, one of the biggest ones in the city. It's also good to know that until 1990, 24 years ago, when that was the end of the communism, the city didn't have big supermarkets, department stores like this at all. Soon we are going to figure out why the police is here. Here you can see on the left hand side. Yes, I can see some Hungarian flags also. I'm going to figure out later. I don't want to make up anything now, I have no idea, unfortunately. Yes, more flags. And I can see the writings, those signs on the cars. It says that banks cheated and stole our money. I think now you can understand everything. I think it's the same situation all over in the world after the recession. Solution, I think it's international. Grandparents. Here in Hungary is the same. So this building that you will see here on the right, this yellow and also white, it has a lot of statues on it. It's beautiful and big enough to be a library or a museum, but it's not. This is just a swimming pool. Swimming pool. To be more accurate, it's a thermal spa. In the city we have 24 thermal spas, and this one is the so-called Széchenyi. You may see above the entrance it says Széchenyi Fürdő. Fürdő is spa, Széchenyi is the name of it. And this one is the biggest one. It has 3 outdoor and 18 indoor pools. The building itself is gorgeous inside too. The building is roughly 100 years old, and it's also very popular among the local people. And it's not rare if you go here, you can see people playing chess on a floating chess board on the in the water. So they are in the pool. It's a local tradition. If you take a look to the left hand side, there you can see our so-called Vajdahunyad castle. Although it's called castle, never king lived inside. This castle is a copy of a Transylvanian one, and here is just a museum what we have. And this little artificial lake here on the left and on the right, the boating lake in the spring and the summertime, but in the winter time it's an ice skating rink with loud music, with hot wine. We Budapest people would love this ice skating rink. Usually we have the ice here, it's an artificial ice, for at least 2 months. Of course it depends on the weather, also the temperature. And here you can see once again these 2 buildings on the left and on the right hand side, the 2 museums. Although they were built in the same time, in the same style, but what you can see on the left hand side is a little bit different. It's a little bit more decorated, it's more colorful. It's because of Michael Jackson. And he was here only once in 1995 or in the middle of 1990s. And he made his music video, the so-called History. And you see here, and they painted the first one, then they made the next one, and unfortunately after 2 they ran out of money. Gold was always expensive, so that's the reason why. So the gold paintings I'm talking about is here on the left, and the next building on the left, the black one, is the Art University. And still on the left, this yellow and grey building is the house of Franz Liszt. I'm sure you know his name. This is the place where he lived when he was here. And here on the right you will see that we have a little exhibition on the street. Behind of this, the building itself is the Terror House. Inside there is an exhibition of the communism. And this exhibition is about what happened in the 1956 revolution. The first Russian soldiers started to leave the country, but because it lasted for more than 1 year actually. That's why we say that really it was over in 1990, because that was the year when we had the first free elections. Of course until 1990 there were no elections at all, because there was one party, the Communist, the Russian, that party. Opera House on the right is in use, still in use of course, and it has very nice Italian Renaissance style. They have guided tours, as also you can see on that red sign, guided tours every afternoon at 3 and 4 o'clock. This is the building, by the way, the Opera House, when Madonna, she was here making the movie called Evita, and inside of the Opera House she did some parts, she made some parts of that movie. Station. From here you can have an access to almost all the metro lines. And this little place here on the right with the Budapest sign, very nice photo opportunity here. So these little stalls were put here a few years ago, 4 or 5 years ago, for temporary to be a summer festival, but on popular demand they stayed here. They became very popular, and here's a place where you can taste the Hungarian traditional food and buy all these little souvenirs. At the end of this street, I will show you the great synagogue of the city. So on the left-hand side, you will see a big brick, yellow and red brick building with the 2 onion towers. I wanted to show you this synagogue because this is the second largest synagogue in the world. And as far as I know, the largest one is in New York. And after the Second World War bombings, when we had to rebuild this building, we got money from the Immanuel Foundation. Immanuel Foundation is the New York synagogue. So literally, the largest synagogue in the world rebuilt the second largest. By the way, the co-founder of the Immanuel Foundation is Tony Curtis. Tony Curtis always found Hungary a very important place because his parents were born here. So Tony Curtis has some Hungarian roots. He was not born here in Hungary, but his parents, they did. We are a couple also. And for example, that bridge, what we'll drive on, it's named after her. We have so many places, buildings, a bridge named after her because Hungarian people loved her so much. She spent a lot of time here in Hungary. She spent a lot of time in the Hungarian royal castle here in Buda, but she had a much bigger palace in the countryside. So here we are back in the downtown. Ahead of us there are 2 buildings, kind of twin buildings, and that's the finest example how the buildings looked like until 1990, how dirty they were. So here on the left you can see that. Exactly the same building on the right, which is already cleaned up. Quite a huge difference. And here is the university on the right, and still on the right you can see here we have a church. This church is one of the oldest churches of Budapest from the 12th century. And this is the Elizabeth Bridge, or kind of Sissi Bridge. Lovely view of the city. On the right you can see the Che Bridge on the Buda Hill, the Royal Castle, the White Tower of the Matthias Church, and on the left hand side you can see the Green Bridge is the Liberty Bridge. But in 1896 it was finished. Queen Elizabeth's husband Franz Joseph the King, he was himself here. And turning here to the right, on the left you will see Bishop Gallia. The hill is named after him. Because he was the one who enlarged the church and also had his wedding and his coronational ceremony inside. Today, just a regular Roman Catholic church, an active one. Every Sunday we have mass inside. A lot of weddings are inside here. And I would like to call attention to the roof, how beautiful it is. It is a local specialty. It's made out of ceramic tiles. The pattern is a traditional Hungarian pattern. And the material what is made out of is a Hungarian invention. We call it pyrogranite, which is actually just like the normal ceramic, it just lasts longer a little bit.